Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Coach's Corner University podcast. I am your host, Paul Oneid, and today I have the distinct pleasure of being joined by someone who I think needs no introduction, Dave Tate. Dave, thanks for coming on the podcast, man.
Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. The cool part for me is so I was on Table Talk about a year and a half ago, and that was a surreal experience for one. But now to have you on the podcast here, it's just like, as a kid who grows up and Elite FTS is all he finds when he starts as a strength coach. Um, how does it feel for you to be in a position where a lot of the people that sit across from you almost see you as like the head on Mount Rushmore to some degree in strength and conditioning?
Um, I guess I don't really see it like that. What what's interesting is, and I'll know we'll talk about it as we kind of move forward,
Mhm.
is when I founded the company, it was all under this premise, to live, learn, pass on. And, when you're in business for 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, it's more about just the passing on part
Yeah.
personally that you're doing and that I was doing. And now I've seen things come so full circle to where people that, have learned from myself and others that we had on the site, say 20 years ago, are telling me how those people helped them,
Hmm.
with their careers and their strength and conditioning. But then also having people tell me who work with those people
Yeah.
how they've been, an influence. So kind of makes you feel old in such a way, but it also kind of validates the aim from the
Yeah.
very beginning because it's happening, where from the start, it was more coming from a place like I feel like I owe it to the people that helped me.
Hmm.
And the hope is that it will continue. And throughout the last 3 decades or so, you begin to kind of doubt if it's going to continue the way that you think or would like it to continue,
Hmm.
because a lot of things have changed in the past 25 years where, online coaching wasn't a thing and all these different things weren't all in play as they are now.
Right.
So when I'd start to see some of these come into play, if going all the way back to just ebooks and stuff like that, it was like, oh shit. So now instead of passing on, they're just going to monetize it instead of passing it on. So is this going to kill the whole passing it on thing? And and for a while there, that was a debate, kind of a heated debate with a lot of people kind of going back and forth and kind of seeing the way all the way through that. It didn't stifle it, it enabled it even more so.
Right.
So that's the coolest thing for me is when I'm sitting across from somebody that will tell me that, my mentor was somebody that I mentored, or
Yeah.
one of the original people on the site mentored. And then that person I'm speaking to is also a coach and mentoring other people. So it only stands to reason that a handful of those people that they're going to work with are going to do the same.
Yeah.
So the industry is good. It's good. It's all good. It's going to stay good.
I think like that's one of the most optimistic views of the industry that I've heard in quite some time. A lot of the people that I speak to have just an overall like pessimistic view of what's happening in health
Hmm.
and fitness. It was actually you and Ed Cohn are just always positive about what they're seeing. And I'm sure there's stuff that pisses you off,
Hmm.
but of course,
Well,
but
of course, but I mean, it's where you're going to put the focus, though.
exactly.
And the other question with that is when you do see something that derogatory or negative, the first thing that I've always asked myself is, why does this bother me?
Hmm.
Okay, because I got to ask myself that first.
For sure.
Because if this is coming from a place of jealousy or competition or something like that, then that's my problem.
Yep.
That's not the problem of where this criticism or wherever it's coming from. And then how big is this situation? How big really is this issue? right? And then after you answer those two questions, 99.9% of it is not an issue.
I also come back to in that situation, like, am I doing everything in my power to be counter to that or to help shift the narrative to one that I think is more helpful? Like
Hmm.
the best solution to bad information is better information.
Hmm.
Never
More
gonna,
better. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I'm never gonna be the one to like scream into the void and shake my fist at the air. It's like, well, what am I actively doing here to, like you said, to pass it on? And that story that you told of, that coach who was mentored by someone who mentored you and now is sitting in front of you and mentoring others, like that's my story, right?
Hmm.
I worked with I worked with, Frank Wintrick, and I worked with Todd Hammer, and I worked with all these people, and now I'm in a situation where I'm helping other people. I'm sitting across from you. I'm like, well, this is like two or three times removed the mentor of my mentors. And
Hmm.
it's really interesting because that to me speaks to the integrity with which you've built the company. And I want to ask about the live, learn, pass on because I mean, when you started the company, was that the ethos, or how did that come about?
It came about not when I originally started, because when I originally started, it was more consulting, and Louis Simmons was doing seminars. He didn't want to do them anymore. So he
I
asked me to
remember
do
that.
those. And so it was the seminars and the consulting. So in a way, it kind of was that ethos without really knowing what it was. It was after a few years when I was able to actually earn enough money to hire a business consultant that I hired. Um, I can't remember the name of the company now, but it was through the E-Myth, and it was
Yeah.
a
Okay.
consulting. They did consulting work through the E-Myth, so it was a 4-year course. And one of the first things that I was required to do was to come up with a primary aim, of what the company was.
Yeah.
And it was a month project. And it took a lot to be able to kind of come up with that. And because it needed to be short, it needed to be strong, it needed to have purpose, it needed to have purpose for me personally, but also to be able to build on values
Yeah.
that could be a company value. Because at the time it was just me. And so after a lot of narrative and a lot of thought and a lot of discussion on why I'm actually doing what I was doing at the time, competing, and the business at the time was just to support the competing, if I'm being completely honest. But it's still
I
it's
Most of
still
us, that's
kind
how
of
it
it's kind of
starts.
the same thing. And with the seminars, and that's where it kind of boiled down into this live, learn, pass on thing, where the in short, you have to live, you know, every day to its fullest. You need to live with reality. You need to understand, exactly where you are, kind of where you want to go, but not get so caught up into where you want to go that you don't stay rooted in where you are.
Sure.
And then don't get too focused on what you've done before in the past, that it takes away from the work that you actually have to do now.
Right.
And then the learning part was, there always has to be an acquisition of skill set as you move forward. Always, even as a power lifter or bodybuilder or whatever you're doing, there's always skill acquisition. And even if you have all the skills, they still need to be refined in those skills. A heavier squat becomes a more difficult squat the closer you get to your 1 hour run. So you have to learn the processes and continue to keep learning to kind of stay, at the very minimum, stay up with the curve, but hopefully stay a little bit ahead of that. And then the pass on part is just, the giving back for, all the things that you've been given, or all the help that other people have helped you with. But in return, what that does is, the more that you pass on and the more you mentor and the more you help other people, the more it helps you learn
Hmm.
and become better at actually coaching and helping other people. So that final piece is really one of the most important pieces, because it plays into the other two.
For sure.
Because you can live a fruitful life, but live a fruitful life just for yourself and not helping anybody else, and I would say you don't have a fruitful life.
I would agree.
Try to help other people, but don't learn how to help them to the best of the ability that you can, or the best of their ability to be able to receive that. And you're not going to help very many people. So it all kind of circles around.
I love that. It resonates really deeply with me, and it always has. I mean, to to be able to have a resource like Elite FTS coming up where there was just unlimited amounts of knowledge. I've been kind of playing with this idea. It originally came from a quote from Jordan Peterson, but he talked about like the highest pursuit of service in your life. And to me, I think a fruitful life, as you mentioned, is one where everyone says, I want to help people. But I think helping people can have many vehicles. You can do it a lot of different ways. The biggest way, like the highest pursuit of service to people, is helping them reach their highest ideal. So
Mm-hmm.
giving them the ability to be their best versions of themselves. And when we go into business, when we have these pursuits, it is inherently selfish, but it's not hedonistic. Like we're not searching for these things for pleasure at the expense of other people. We do this so that we can pass on. And that is where we get that validation.
Well, there's to be able to effectively help other people, you have to have your own house in order,
Yeah, oh yeah.
right? So if you're mentally, physically, spiritually, and financially not in a really good position, you're not going to be able to help people from the place that you should be able to help them from. So the pushback that you're kind of talking about is a false dichotomy,
Yeah.
because if you're living in complete stress all the time, or if you're doing everything that you can to make ends meet, then when you go to help other people, it's gonna feel more like an obligation, and
Mhm.
it's not going to come from the heart. It's going to come from the head. Because then I would question why you're really doing it. Are you doing it because you think that this theory of reciprocity, or however you say that,
Yeah.
is gonna come back from there? So with pretty much all things, when I hear the word selfishness, I don't see that as a bad thing,
Mhm.
because if I'm not my to the my physical best, mental best, if I'm not at all those top tiers, or at least close to those top tiers, then how well can I take care of my own family?
Oh,
And then it spins out from there. I have to be strong enough and physically and capable enough to be able to take care of my own family. Then after that, I have to be able to take care of my employees. Then after that, I have to be able to take care of my community or my neighborhood. And then after that, I'll worry about state issues and federal issues, or whatever it's going to be. But usually there's not a whole lot left, after you take care of your own house, your family's house, your employee's house. There's not a whole lot left to be able to have a whole bunch of bantering narrative over state or political or powerlifting drama or whatever it's going to be. The bandwidth just isn't there. So when I'll see people that have like 80% bandwidth that's all in those other things, to me it's like, okay, here's a clue that this person may need some help, getting their own house in order. And the reason why they're so frustrated or so upset is probably dealing more with that than it is a lot of the other issues.
I love that. I love that. So you started Elite FTS. It was you on your own. I think a lot of young coaches have a business that they start, they're by themselves. But you know as well as I do, as you grow a business, you cannot be the front face of your business forever. How has it been for you transitioning from, the guy to maybe the head of state? And then actually, what actually just came to my mind right now is I remember Louis saying, when I die, West Side dies.
Mm-hmm.
How do you make sure that doesn't happen with Elite FTS?
I've been very cognizant of that since we really just short after the time that we went online. when it started online, it was just like a banner page, under deepsquatter.com and something else like that.
Oh man,
And then
that brings me back. Deep
yeah,
deepsquatter.com.
yeah. Then a seminar led me to meeting somebody that had a friend that was developing a new type of forum that wasn't really a forum, because I didn't want a forum. I just wanted a better way to do the Q&As that I was doing on Deep Squatter, instead of having the questions emailed to me,
Hmm.
then email them back, and then once a month they would post. And this was provide real time. And when that provided real time, this website started as just a Q&A. It's called Ask Dave. People would ask questions, then I provide the answers and just knock it all out from there. Once I started moving through the eMyth modules, one of the first things I was told was, to free up more of my time to work on the business, I have to have other people answer these Q&As. And that was a problem for me back then, because I'm like, wait a minute,
For sure.
the only reason they're asking these questions is because it's me.
Yep.
And if I'm not answering the questions, nobody's going to answer the questions. Then we're not going to have the site traffic, and da 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 da.
Mhm.
And then more likely probably an ego blow, and a lot of other things were kind of playing into that, where I think Bob Youngs was the first person I brought on, then I brought on 3 or 4 other people.
The worst
And
knee wrapper in the history of
yeah,
podcast.
yes. And so then as it started to scale from there, I learned that lesson really, really quickly. So and back then we had training logs, coaching logs, and
Yep.
articles. So if my coaching log built up to, number 1, and it was by a large margin, and it would stay there for a few months, I quit posting. And then I let the other logs come up. Same
Okay.
thing with the articles. If my articles started to always be the top ranked articles, I quit writing articles. Um, Q&A, the same thing. So a lot of times it would work in a rotation, to where, okay, now I'm not going to post articles, I'm just going to do more Q&As, or now I'm not going to do my log, I'm going to do more articles, and then kind of move it around that way. So that way the brand could always carry more weight than myself. And it's still always going to be synonymous to a certain degree,
Sure.
but it was harder for me to kind of break the whole West Side mode than it was to navigate this. Trying to first starting being the conjugate, coming from the West Side, and everybody forgetting I had a decade of competing before that, but and trying to put out content that was across the board, just strength and conditioning from all different types of periodization models. And that was the hardest thing, was trying to do that piece. And to the point where I can remember, when we bring in athletes, they'd all tell me that they trained conjugate. Then I would talk to them and be like, dude, the only thing that you do that's even remotely close to anything that we did at Westside is a board press.
Yeah.
It's a linear model where they use board presses.
Or bands. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a harder one to be able to kind of navigate than the others. But I think the only reason for that was it was pointed out to me very, very fast.
Interesting. Have you found, because I saw the transition, like I started looking at Elite FTS relatively early on in my career, around 2007, 2008 was when I first started like consuming online content about strength and conditioning. And then the site grew to have like, I think you guys had like almost 30 sponsored logs at one point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
To the logs kind of dwindled away. The Q&A was still there, but it kind of dwindled a little bit. It was way more heavily on articles. Now it's more online content. And it's almost like you've been thrust back into that front-facing role with the podcast.
In a way, it's even when we started, there was no Facebook, there was no Instagram, there was no
Yeah.
social media, there were just forums. So when we started, the articles were the way that I would kind of explain this is, if I had somebody that was a team member that was part of Elite FTS, the Q&A kind of showed that they walked the walk. The coaching logs showed, I'm sorry, the training logs showed that they walked a walk. The coaching logs showed that they walked a walk. Um, the training or the Q&A showed that they cared about people enough to answer questions, and then the articles kind of displayed their knowledge. So we were able to kind of hit all three pillars
For
through
sure.
each one of those means that were on the website. Now, when Facebook came out, each post on Facebook essentially kind of looked like a coaching blog. Like you could post on Facebook and you'd post
Yeah.
your thoughts, and that would be like a coaching log. But now, those people can get that in real time. You can tap it out in real time, and then you can exchange with them in real time.
Right.
So over a period of time, that really started to dilute the coaching logs, because why go through, this Elite FTS terminal when I can go here on Facebook, have it in real time, and it's right there 24/7 anytime I want that.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it's also be easier for the author, because it's an easier platform to be able to upload video, to be able to upload photos and so forth, instead of having to put the shit in with HTML code or whatever we had at the time.
Yeah.
All right, so that kind of started to dilute the coaching logs. And then when Instagram came out, that diluted the training logs, because the training logs were essentially the athletes posting their training and then putting an embedded clip from YouTube or whatever into their log and then tapping it all out. So now they can do that on Instagram, and it's easier for the people to just follow them directly on Instagram, and then you have that exchange faster with that as well. So those two things kind of got stifled because of the growth of Facebook and the growth of Instagram. The articles in between that time period, the articles became actually a little bit more popular, because finding that medium form content. Now, I don't want to say long form, because that's changed over a period of time to what it is now, where that what would then be long form content, but now we would call medium form content, still wasn't really being targeted by any real social media platform, because nobody wants to read a freaking article on a Facebook post.
Right.
And you have a character limit on Instagram. So we doubled down on the articles for a while, to a point where I think we were close to 2 a day, 7 days a week with that.
Wow.
And then over a period of time, that began, to kind of take a hit as well, because of people's attention spans, or for whatever reason that's going to be.
Yep.
And the podcast kind of became the catalyst to be able to, because now how do I bring in these people like I had before, to be able to show that they walk the walk, they talk the talk, and they know their shit? Well, now I can put them on a long form podcast, and I just covered all three.
Yeah, you sit down with
So
someone for 3 hours, you can learn everything that they want, learn
yeah,
almost everything about them.
yes. So exactly the same pillars are being fulfilled. They're just now being fulfilled in a different media sphere than
Yep.
what it was before. And 10 years from now, it will be a different media sphere as well. Some of the mistakes I made, kind of going through all this, is trying to navigate which media sphere is the, and who knows, right? is which is the one that's actually going to work.
Right.
And with that becomes a lot of frustration, because there's so many different ones. There's been so many that have come and gone too. But throughout, some of that frustration was me pulling back a little too much and saying, what, screw all of them. We're just going to
Mhm.
double down on what we know. Meanwhile, still knowing that Instagram is the one that's popping and has been popping for a year or two.
Yep.
Facebook was the one that was popping. Now I kind of don't know, it's just kind of dwindling a little bit as far as demographics. It's
Yeah.
hit or miss. Digital marketing is probably better than others, but, and then, podcasts are the ones that are popping now. That one, I think I hit that one about right from a timing perspective. Too early, then you're going to burn out, because it's not going to have that same trajectory of growth.
It's a lot of pivoting. It's a lot of pivoting. How much time would you say that you spend and this is so I do spend a lot of time in reflection and like looking at the business and what I'm doing and how that's having returns. and my business is probably 1% of elite FTS. How much time are you spending on the business doing that sort of strategizing?
I'll take 2 or 3 2 week quote unquote air quotes vacations per year just for this. So
I love
it's,
vacation.
yeah, so I'm not in the office, but I'm also not like in a vacation place where, it's the same place I go in Myrtle Beach every single time. So I know where everything is. I'm there long enough to where I can get bored. And then usually if I can get bored, I can start seeing things from different perspectives, and it gets me away from all the administrative things that can pull me away from being able to focus on and look at the business from a different perspective. Actually many different perspectives. So I may look at it as, okay, I'm the investor today. What is worth anything here, if at all?
Mm.
Like financially, is this even a valuable commodity at all? And then if I'm the customer, how would I look at this? If I was a coach, how would I look at this? And then I'll process kind of all that. And then when I come back, I can either implement or not implement based upon that. But getting away is vital to be
Mm.
able to do that.
When I was in town, you and I spoke about the strategies that you had where you would pick certain aspects of the business and really sprint on those and pull back on other things. And then
Hmm.
when you had got to where you wanted to be with that one thing, you would pick a different thing and sprint on that. Was that always the strategy that you had? And how do you decide what to sprint on and when?
What's growing, what's moving. If something has any bit of momentum, then I'm going to double down on that. But before I can make that decision to double down on that, I kind of have to look at the resources. Like, am I going to be the one that's going to double down on that? Or, what employee, team member do I have that's going to have to double down on that?
Mm.
And then if it's me doubling down on it, it's a little bit different. Not that my time is infinite, but I can work 90 hours a week. I don't have a problem with that. Employees are not going to want to do that, so they're looking at 40 hours a week. And is the resources there for them to be able to double down on that? Or do we have to pull away something to be able to allow them to double down on that? So that's where that deprioritization will come from.
Gotcha.
That I don't want them working 80-hour weeks or 60-hour weeks. I mean, optimally, I want them to be able to have a life, and work 40-hour weeks like most people would be able to do. And so most of the time that's the case. It's something that we need to double down on. That won't necessarily be me, but I have to be able to create the resources for that to happen financially. You know, hiring somebody else to come in and take, other responsibilities or a different position is a way bigger ask, for something like that, because of the financial constraints that can cause.
Right.
It may happen, down the line if this actually creates a revenue stream that's able to actually support that. In most cases, that's not true. But sometimes if it is, the goal is for that to be the case,
Right.
for it to be able to pop up and then be able to create enough revenue to be able to hire somebody else to be able to come in.
You ever taken a gamble on something that you thought was a shoe in and it just flopped?
Almost all of them. I mean,
I
that's
think
just business.
I think that's a really important thing to highlight. Like you never know what's going to work, what's not going to work, and you might catch that.
Yeah, the better question would be, when do you know the time to stop?
Great question.
That's the harder question, right? Because most of the things that you're going to start are not going to work, or they're going to work on the margins, you know. So to be able to quantify that is important, right? Because if it just works on the margins, and then what are my labor costs to be able to do that? Because if it's just on the margins, then we're at a loss. We can't do that. Do the labor costs just support it? Optimally, you want the labor costs to be less than what the outcome of that's going to be.
Of course.
But some things have a longer run rate, before you're going to be able to get to that point.
Mm,
And that's where taking some time away, helps, because I can take time away. I can see what that potential may be. Then I can get a hold of other people that I know that may have gone down this road to kind of guesstimate whatever run rate they're telling me. Because most of the time they're not going to remember correctly. They're going to be a little off, but you can kind of get within a good swinging range to
mm.
be able to know this is a year, for this. And then you plan that all out. If this is a year for this and it operates at the margins or below the margins, then what else has to happen to be able to bring that back up to neutral, while this is going through its trajectory.
That's really interesting. I think a lot of people succumb to the sunk cost fallacy, myself included, where, oh, I've put so much time into this, I might as well just keep going and see it through. It's like maybe
That's how
you
you go out
should.
of business, man,
Yep.
because it will keep ticking down 1%, 1%, 1%, 1%. And then over a long term, now you're in a position to where it's like, shit, the opportunity cost alone on that, far exceeds. But all this in mind, everything takes longer than you think,
Right.
especially if it's a young entrepreneur. Everything takes way long. It Let me backtrack that. It's way faster than it used to be 20 years ago, because of
No
all
doubt.
the
Yeah.
different resources that we have. But it's still not to the speed that your Instagram entrepreneur, you know, whatever you want to call those
If you want to
guys.
call it an entrepreneur, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. The gurus are saying it's still longer than that.
That hits home. I mean, I don't think many of the people listening, other than my mom, will know that like I had a mobile app at one point, and we did pretty well. We had over 500 users at one point, all paying, and it was exactly like you said. We just didn't have the resources to continue the runway. Trickle down, trickle down, trickle down, trickle down to a point where we're investing all of our time into this thing that, quite frankly, had run its course. You end up in the red, and then you have to pull the plug. Meanwhile, you're tens of thousands of dollars in the hole for this thing. You learn a lesson, call it an education tax. You move on.
I wouldn't even call that a tax, I would just call it education, right? Because you learn a lot,
Oh yeah.
through all those things that don't work out, as long as you don't repeat the mistakes,
No, yeah.
then normally through, cycles like that, as you keep moving forward, whatever that loss was that you attributed to that will be fivefold gain and not making that mistake on the next thing.
Oh, I can attest to that for sure. Like the lessons that I learned through that experience, one of the main reasons why our company has continued to grow. And um, I want to come back to, obviously you've accrued an incredible amount of business knowledge over the course of Elite FTS from the inception to now. I'm assuming that you didn't come into this with a lot of business acumen.
Oh
How did you
yeah.
start to learn the business side of business?
I had some to where my father owned a high-end appliance store
Okay.
for pretty much my whole life. And my mother's father had an appliance store that my father and my mother worked at before that. So, and then on my grandfather on the other side had an ice cream store. So I grew up around small business environments. I grew up around, a dinner table that business was not always discussed, but customer service was, or, shitty customers were,
Yeah.
discussed. Phone calls on Thanksgiving from somebody that their stove broke down, so all these cleaning appliances when I was 12 years old. So I I can't dismiss that background, considering the fact that I sell high-end strength equipment,
Right.
with the high quality and the high service, and all that was kind of baked into my DNA from the beginning. And then my first year in college, I took, business courses, accounting, marketing, all the basic business courses. It was a business school. And then when I transferred out of that, there was no more business in there at all. So there was enough of a background in there to have a pretty decent idea on the pillars of business. Here's the difference between sales, marketing, accounting, finance, customer service, all those things. Once I started the business, the E-Myth thing helped a lot. It definitely helped a lot because that was a 4-year process of learning business in your own business. So nobody was saying, here's a case study, or here's a case study, or here's a case study. It's like, here's your financial system, of note cards and log ledger books, or QuickBooks or whatever. Let's walk through and learn all these different attributes. So with that, I'll say some of the things that I did correctly was to not fall down sales and marketing rabbit hole from the start, which maybe I should have spent more time on that, but making sure things like and lead generation is marketing, but making sure that, just systems are in place for customer service or, shipping fulfillment, all these other things that happen behind the scenes were taken care of. And when you're not moving, a lot of product, you're moving 4 products a week. It's kind of easy to build systems,
Right.
to be able to fix all those different type of things. And I had enough of a working knowledge that over the period of business that we've been in, as software would come out, I was able to better vet what software was going to be able to accommodate the needs that we have. Because there's a big difference, man, a big difference from going from like small business software, like we used to use QuickBooks,
Right.
to enterprise software.
Right.
There's a giant price difference. There's a giant integration difference. There's all these different things. So a lot came through that. And then I've read so many different business books to this point. I'll still buy them, but really don't even have to read them because you can just skim through the chapters. And it's like, I've read this, I've read this, I've read this, I've read this. But sometimes, it's a small investment,
Yep.
$20 or whatever it's going to be. Sometimes you may see one thing that you forgot about, or one story that they'll write about that you can relate to that can make a big change. So, and then staying on top of it, now it's in a different situation to where a lot of my business communications is being done with people who know way, way, way more than what I do about
Mhm.
business, so it's trying to ratchet up my terminology, to be able to ask better questions of the people that are coming more from a corporate world
Mhm.
than from, small business world, because there's a big disconnect, between those two. And I've brought in some corporate people. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But when you're a small business, you kind of deal with like drama, and we're a family business,
Yeah.
so my son works here. My wife is 60% owner. My sister-in-law is the warehouse manager. I'm probably forgetting others, but that's different than if you're at a corporation of 1,000 people, and you have politics that are in play, so
There's a few pieces that I want to pull out of there. The first one being you mentioned bringing people to have a look at the business, learning. You've been a mentor to so many people. Who are the people that you have looked to over the years as mentors, if any, or has it largely been like a self-driven pursuit?
I was taught from a young age to not have any idols outside of God. So I've never really looked up to idolize anybody as far as a specific individual. Now I'll look up to people for certain traits, work ethic, stuff like that. So I've had uh, different mentors for different areas. It's a good friend of mine actually was more a mentor before a friend, is in public relations, so back in the day, I've had to rely on a lot of conversations with him in regards to how to navigate certain issues.
Wait, so you
Become
had a mentor for customer relations, and you hired Jim Wendler to do customer service?
the mentor came after Wendler.
Okay.
Yeah. Jim did a good job though. I mean, he was great with customers. It's occasionally, I mean, but I mean, I was probably the worst, to be honest with you, because that was the first thing I wanted to get the hell out of,
Right.
was that, just that whole aspect. And I can't remember the last time. It's probably been pre-COVID since I had any customer service issue escalate to me.
Okay.
Um,
Well, that's
and
good.
if it does escalate to me, the person's not going to like me when we're done. Because if it escalates to me, that means that they've probably frustrated or pissed off at least two of my employees before it got to me.
Yeah.
Usually, if it's a problem that's just hard to handle, my customer service rep or one of the two will ask me how to navigate it, and usually it's just give them whatever they want plus more. It's it's not that hard,
Yeah.
to be able to do that. But the PR thing, that was more along the lines of how to exit people if it's an employee or if it's a team member, to be able to have the least amount of repercussions. Or back then, I probably cared a little bit too much about what somebody would say online than what I normally
Mm.
that I wouldn't say past 6 years or so, and feeling that I would have to have a response to something. Most of it usually kind of came around the the realm of, here's a team member that represents our company, team member is accused of X, and me, I'm supposed to weigh in on this, which for me was always a weird thing. Like, why am I supposed to weigh in on this? And why is, my opinion the overreaching opinion of a company that has, 20 employees
Mhm.
who all have different opinions? So trying to wrap my head around that, and then how to formulate messaging around that, I needed some help with,
For sure.
and so that helped there. Other mentors, I guess I could say Louis Simmons was definitely a mentor, not just for training, but for some aspects of life. I mean, he was the epitome of being living in a bubble, a
Yeah.
smaller bubble than I was in. So there's some good things from there. There's some not so good things from there. Um, Other than that, there's really not.
I'll say one thing about Louis, and I only had the pleasure of meeting him a handful of times, but the one time that jumps out to me, it was the second time I had met him. And in between going to Elite with our strength and conditioning staff and Todd, or sorry, going to Westside and meeting him for the first time, and then seeing him at a meet, I had like one of my biggest totals ever. He remembered how much I squatted and
Mhm.
congratulated me on it.
Crazy like that, man.
I could not believe it. I was like, what the fuck just happened?
He was so, I don't know how, right? Because I mean, the dude didn't have a high school degree. I don't know how, but the whole time I trained there, and it was probably close to 14 years, I
Mhm.
never had to keep a training log at
He
all.
was your
No,
training log.
he was. And granted, I mean, with accessories, does it really matter if it's push downs and shit like that? But for all the max effort variations that we would have, it would just simply be like Louis, what's my PR on this?
I bet it was
And
like the most obscure movements too. It's like, hey, what's my giant cambered bar to a 12-inch box and
dude,
160?
the grip, like, today we're going thumb away from the smooth on a floor press. What's my best? 465 or whatever it's going to be. All right. Next time, okay, we're using, pinky on the rings. What's my best? 480. And like, oh,
That's amazing.
and it was a close grip incline. It didn't matter what it was. It was just there
Yeah.
all the time. And it's like, I don't know how in the hell. he knew. I didn't know. I mean, I guess I should. I mean, most people care about their max effort work. The only thing I ever really cared about was what I would do in a meet,
Me
you
too.
know, so it really didn't make that much difference. I had an idea, but no clue whatsoever. And I didn't want to be the guy that ever like tied your fucking best max effort lift.
The I think bringing Louis up is a phenomenal segue because one thing about Louis is he was authentically himself in every situation. And one thing that has always stuck with me about your business, a few other of the businesses that I've had the pleasure of associating with is coming to the table with integrity as number one. And whenever you're in the situation of business, it's always a very ever present question. And honestly, I shouldn't say question because it has a very easy answer to it for most. You have never traded integrity for a dollar. What is something that has helped you stay true to that as you've grown the company? Because I can only imagine that with the different verticals that you have, you've had opportunities to do that.
There's been a lot of opportunities and there's been a lot of discussions around certain things around that. Um, and integrity is based upon your own core values.
Mhm.
And part of that primary aim development phase was also determining my core values and kind of building that into what the core values of the company would be, which has been condensed to focus, trust, and strength. But before it was like 7 different core values. And the exercise they had me do, I've had many people do this since then, was to write down names of people who have had some positive influence on me before I graduated from college or high school, whatever it is. And it could be a fictional character in a book, a movie character, Conan the Barbarian, whatever.
Yeah.
Just write down those names and then write down what they said or did that stuck out. And then on the flip side of the sheet of paper, write down 10 situations that have happened that just pissed me off to no end. Things that were really hard to let go, or maybe you still don't even let go from it. Write down those people and then write down, a statement, what that was. And then Google search list of core values. And then go through each one of those lists and assign a core value or the same core value to each one of those things. So if it's true that our values are all ingrained, before we're 15, they're probably not going to change, right?
Fair.
All right. So core values, right? The core values. I mean, you'll grow into and adapt, other values, but those aren't going to change. And so what I kind of learned from that was, the negative people are a violation of the value, right? The positive people are a core value. So by having those core values written, by my desk for a long time, a long time. I mean, it was like glued, and whatever under like the glass. Anytime I had a situation that was like you're talking about, like I could do this and maybe make way more money, or this is really frustrating to me and I really don't know why. I could sit there and ponder it to try to figure it out, but most of the time, if I just looked at those words, it hit me right there.
Yeah.
Right. So because of that, I don't want to say that I've never had sleepless nights because of business, but because of that, I've had very, very few nights where I've been laying in bed thinking, man, I wish I didn't do that, or I shouldn't have done that, or this is so freaking frustrating to me, because I'm able to pinpoint why it is that. And integrity, in a way, isn't really how you are at your best. It's the decisions that you make when that decision may not benefit you in any way,
I like that a lot.
right? Because it's the easy decisions are the ones that, you know, this person just punched another employee in the face, or, whatever is going to be some, or, this team member raped somebody or some fucked up shit like that. Those are simple, right? It's the other ones, to where nobody's really going to know one way or another, but
You know.
and
Yep.
when that creates that sleepless night, right? So it's basically just living as close to the core values as you possibly can.
I'm gonna keep this moving because one thing that I like to have in my life, and I describe them as lighthouses. So to the point where I have a lighthouse, tattooed on my forearm. And I have a few lighthouses in my life, one of them being my wife. And you mentioned Elite FTS being a family business, your wife being a part owner of the company, well, majority owner of the company if she owns
Mm-hmm.
10%. That has to play a role. Having her to have like I look at my wife, one of the ways I describe my wife is she's an integrity check for me, where I know that as soon as I open the door to my office, I have to look at her and I have to know, did I do what was best for us today?
Mm-hmm.
How has having Tracy involved with the business allowed you to grow further?
She's one of the few that I've had in my life that will call me out on my own bullshit,
Yeah.
right? And this becomes more problematic when you're the boss,
Hmm.
or you're the strongest guy in the gym, or, whatever hierarchy or perceived hierarchy is there, then fewer and fewer people are going to feel comfortable calling you out on what they think you're doing is wrong or not the right direction. No problem with my wife at all. It's no problem with John Meadows, no problem with Bob Youngs. I mean, the sad point is a lot of these people I've had in my life has since then passed,
Right.
but they all had these roles to where they were comfortable with that. I still have people now that are comfortable with that I like to keep people that don't really even understand this whole area that we work in as
Hmm.
well for that, because you train, you work, you train, you work. I mean, it's all this same realm of bubble, more or less,
Yep.
that, people outside of that bubble have different perspectives, and are able to kind of do that. So the biggest thing would be that, and the other thing is, as the company has grown, we've been very distinct on what the roles are, so you deal with, the accounting and bookkeeping and financial side, that kind of all falls with her as I guess you call it COO.
Hmm.
Um, and that doesn't give me a an out to not understand the financial data. That's extremely important with everything that I do,
Right.
but I don't have to worry about, all of that. Whereas when it comes to marketing, sales, more tech type of stuff, that falls, on me. So there's very little room where it's interwound with that. When we had areas where we're in around, then it created conflict,
Hmm.
issues at home and stuff like that. She's also a polar opposite, to where she doesn't want to talk about work shit at home,
Mine too.
and where I could talk about this 24/7,
Right.
where the only things that we talk about at home would be things that we don't feel comfortable speaking about, in front of other employees.
Of course. I mean, as much as you mentioned earlier in our talk today, I could work 90 hours a week and not give a shit. I love it. I'm like, yeah, yeah, pretty much the same. But having
Well, I'm on a podcast. Okay, go ahead.
having my wife in the picture, and knowing that she likes to take time away and she doesn't want to work 90 hours a week. And
It's frustrating sometimes, isn't it?
It
to
isn't, it
you.
isn't, it isn't because I know I need that. I need that polarity to pull me away because I do my best work when I do have time to disconnect, like you mentioned.
Yeah, yeah.
So, we have Saturday as our day where we don't work. I might do a few emails in the morning or a check-in or two, whatever, but from 9 a.m. onward, we don't work. We spend the day together. We do something, especially now. Um, we moved to Texas for the winter and been going to Astros games and like we went to a Houston Rockets game, which is great, sightseeing and things like that. But I having someone in my life who I can look to and say, I need your opinion on this. And I will know unequivocally that she won't sugarcoat it.
Hmm.
She'll tell me I'm dumb. She'll tell me it's short-sighted. She'll tell me it won't work. I'll be like, okay. And I hold that to a very high standard
Yeah.
because I know she's
No,
right.
having people like that is huge.
Yeah. Um, I would like to ask one more question before we go into some ridiculousness.
Sure.
Training for you over the years has changed a lot.
Yeah.
Had multiple surgeries, but having been in the gym with you within the last couple of years, you still train fucking hard, man. What is training to you now versus what was it previously?
Um, it's not ranked number one,
Mhm.
where, previously when I was competing, and I would say even for a time period after that, when I was trying to figure out what training was going to mean, because when you compete and that's your number one priority for 3 decades,
Mhm.
there's a little bit of a identity crisis of trying to figure out what exactly this is going to be. And that was an interesting road to navigate, through, bodybuilding coaches and all this other stuff to try to find kind of where I am now. And training is my, it's an anchor,
Yep.
it's an anchor point. Um, Lifting heavy and hard is the anchor point, not the accessories and all the other stuff. So for me, it's, some kind of stupid squat variation that I'm always trying to push.
Right.
And that's only once a week, but and it's for my joints and my current avatar that I live in. It No, it's not the best, right? I understand that. But because of that and trying to control my stupidity to the best that I possibly can, to be able to do my stupidity means that I have to keep my nutrition in check to be able to recover. I have to keep my rest in check to be able to recover. I have to do all the crappy accessory stuff during the week that I really never want to do because I won't be able to get the outcome of what I really want, from that. So in the broad scheme of all that, it helps me to be able to be, you know, a better business leader
Yep.
because of that. The only and the lower that I've been able to slowly pull my weight down, the better all that's become. While it does have an impact on my maximum strength, of course,
Mhm.
um, it better prepares me for you'll have 90-hour work weeks that sometimes are intentional, like you're
Yep.
trying to push a project, but there's a lot of those that come around that are non-intentional. And to be able to string together 3, 4, 5, maybe even 6 of those is really, it's more physically demanding than what most people think it is. And you have to be, God, this is so weird to say now, and you have to be in shape to be able to do that,
For sure.
right? And as you're doing that, you also need to be able to know how to mitigate your own training so you're not overreaching on either aspect of all that to be able to do it. Where when I would try to do that before, when I was fat, heavier, and all I cared about was the maximum weight, it wrecked me. It just,
Mhm.
I mean, it will still wreck me after 6 weeks or whatever, but it wrecked me after a week and a half. And then it's like, well, what's the point of all these extra hours if now I need a week, just to living in brain fog just to kind of get back to normal again? I
Yep.
could have just spread it all out. So that's kind of what it means to me now is more, I don't like the word optimization. It's popularity. It's just, I don't like things that everybody else says. So I guess it's that, but it's trying to be able to keep, trying to be able to keep myself in a state to where if, those times come that are not intentional, then I can just blitz through those and
Mhm.
not have a problem because somebody still has to get the work done, you know.
Yeah. I like that you use the word anchor, and that's how I viewed my training, especially over the last couple of years. It's like even when I transitioned away from competing in powerlifting to doing that bodybuilding show, it wasn't an effort to keep my anchor intact. And I do need that thing to push for. So you spoke about lifting hard and lifting heavy as your anchor. For me it's just training in general and having that
Mm-hmm.
release of training and having that, that 2 hour time block in my day that I build the rest of my day around. That to me is super important. And I think the secondary effect of doing a bodybuilding show is you don't sleep very much. So I had,
Yeah,
3, 4 extra hours during the day where I could do other
yeah.
shit.
Now,
Uh,
my main objective is to get to where you are. It really is. I mean, that's where it is. But
yeah,
I just have such a like, I've had to move my training to earlier in the morning now because I'm
too.
just too shot by the end of a workday that it became, I disliked it even more so.
Mhm.
Where now if it's earlier in the morning, it's a little bit easier and, you know, but it's tough, right? Because I don't enjoy what was this morning, back, biceps, like pull downs and rows and curls and a bunch of other stupid shit. I don't even care. You're just kind of going through the motions, but you know, one work set with each thing is kind of fun, but it's
Yep.
not the same
It's
as when
not the
the
same.
weekend rolls around.
The way I always describe it, because I am going to compete in powerlifting again. I have decided on a meet in December. So I'm curious to see how that plays into the business and how we're able to leverage that journey, especially through YouTube, chronicling getting back onto the platform. But looking
The
at it like,
difference for me is the recovery aspect. Because when I was doing the bodybuilding stuff, I mean, you get into this
yeah,
zombie like, state to where food, nutrition, all that's kind of in there. Your sleep's going to take a shit, because you're getting leaner. But when it's a strength thing, then man, the recoveries, it's,
I think it's gonna be
I
more
don't want to say
cognitive.
it's more noticeable,
Yeah,
right? Because you don't lift the weight or it's way heavier than what it should be. Where with the bodybuilding training, you can kind of work at subpar recovery and still kind of get the training done.
yeah. I'm curious, but the where I was going with it was like having that as part of my life, just in general, makes me a better version of myself.
Yeah, because it's consistent. You have control,
Yeah,
right? So it's the one thing that I can say the same for myself. It's the one thing that I have the most control over.
yeah,
Right. So yes, there's variability in strength and all that, but I'm pretty sure on Saturday I'm going to be squatting with a safety squat bar and with suspended chains, and this is how this is going to go. And I know what it's going to look like. I know what it's going to be for the whole fucking year because it's all kind of planned out. That one thing. I don't know what my kid's going to be like when I get home. I don't know what is going to happen later in the day. I'm grounded there.
yeah.
In the certainty of that.
Great word. Great word. Grounded. Yeah, 100%. So I always like to finish off my podcast with like some ridiculous questions, and I
Yeah.
think bringing back some memories will be a great place to start. What is the scariest lift you've ever seen performed in person?
Oh God, that's a good question. Usually when people ask these questions, I got to search, for answers. That was Mark Barley when he blew both his quads out
Oh my,
in it was a pro-am in Dayton, and I believe it was 1,200 pounds. And it was, I mean, it's scary for a lot of reasons. I've seen a lot of people go down, but it was so loud. It was like two gunshots, bam, bam, bam. Then he hit the ground, and then he didn't get up for a while, and that's kind of normal in a meet, right? But it was a
yeah.
little longer than what you would normally expect. the scariest part was when he was in the warm-up room and being around this sport for more years of my life than I've yeah. So out of all the years that I've been alive, I've been around powerlifting more by a large percent. If I started when I was 12, I'm 57, right? So
Yeah.
it's and so normally if somebody goes down in the back and it's a friend of yours, somebody you know, and you go to check on them, for me, what the answer or what the first question they'd always ask me was, how long is this one going to take? You know, because you tear a bicep and you're in a warm-up room, you're going to look to the guy that tore a bicep, be like, man, how long is this?
Yeah.
How long is this going to set me back? Like, because you're already planning, like, how's this going to come back?
Yep.
And all he said when I walked up, he said, "This is bad." And I thought,
Oh,
oh shit, and this is bad. That is way up there above all the other ones.
what is the most emotion that you've ever had tied to a lift?
Probably the first, and it wasn't 600. It might have been 605 because I missed 600 bench. I missed it so many damn times, and it was such a frustrating thing for me because my best raw bench was 545, and my best like one board was 585. You know, raw, and I could not, for the life of me, get shit out of a shirt. I just couldn't, and it was so frustrating watching all these people just benching 800 pounds and all this other 700 pounds and knowing where I was, but I just, for some stupid ass reason, I wouldn't be able to touch, or all the different things that happen with a shirt. So I got to a point where I'm like, it's fucking just 600, right? That's the problem. it's
Mhm.
it's like, it's the devil for me. I got to go 605. And on some freaking glorious day, for whatever damn reason, it actually went down and touched and came up in half a second. You know, you feel great because finally I got this stupid, you know, number off of my back. I didn't care about, being on the list at Westside or any of that kind of shit. It's just like, come on, man. I've been benching 540 since a year out of high school, and without a shirt. I'm like, these shirts are a nightmare. And that one there was just like, that's probably the first one. The second one was, and I didn't officially do it, would have been a 700 bench, and that was in the ass end of my career, so I couldn't grab a squat bar at that point at all. And Louis was having issues with Bill Crawford style of benching with a shirt and all this other stuff. And I still had this problem because I was a really, really good bencher for a really long time. Right. Then the kind of the shirts came around and I wasn't able to learn the shirts as well. And it kind of tanked down to where I wanted to bench 700. And I knew for me to do this, I wasn't going to be training at Westside. I was going to be training at the place that we had on Main Street. Wendler was going to be helping me because he just benched something ridiculous by seeing Bill Crawford for one day. I mean, he went from something like 585 to 660 for a triple.
Holy shit.
And I'm like, okay. So I'm explaining all this to Louie. Like, I need to get this. I need to get this out of my system, right? Because I'm still not cool with a whatever it was, 40-pound carryover or some
Mhm.
shit, 50-pound carryover. And so we went to work on, trying to learn the bench, or, different style of training my bench. Still did the speed work at Westside, still studied all the other training at Westside, just not the max effort day. And get ready for this meet. I benched 700 off of one board. It's easy. Typically a one board would equate for me to what a shirt was. And I also wanted to prove Louis wrong, right? Because he hated what we were doing. And Wendler and JL were also doing it in the gym, and he hated it. I can't overstate that. Hated it. So he's sitting in the front row of that meet, and I opened at 630, and it was about an inch away from touching, and just blew it back up. So I'm excited as fuck, right? Okay, this is easy as hell. Blew this back up. I just need more weight. So I go to 700 and it comes down about an inch away,
Hmm.
right? Back then I might have said a half inch away, but inch away, right?
Yeah,
The older you get, the more reality comes into focus.
for sure.
Same thing, just slam it back up. It's fucking, it's easy. Right. And the whole time Louis like coming in the warm up room between like, I told you this shit don't work. I told you this shit don't work. And now I'm getting mad. I'm bloated as hell, by the way. I'm never been more bloated in my life. I'm using everything I can possibly use to try to get this stupid thing done.
That's so
Touch it
funny.
on my third and then press it up, lock the right arm out or lock my left arm out. And my right shoulder's the bad one. My right side clips underneath the J cup
Oh
of the
no.
bench, and I press the J cup out, because they lift up. And it's a bad lift because you hit the racks, right?
Right.
But in my mind, I'm like, fuck yeah, I bench this. I don't care what anybody ever says. I don't care if there's a video of it. I did this damn thing. If I was set up, an inch back or an inch lower, it would have
Yeah.
been done. Louis come up to me afterwards. He's like, I told you this shit wasn't gonna, and I'm like, did you just see what I just did? And he's like, no, what I see is what's going to be in Powerlifting USA, which is a 0 across the board. And I'm like,
Ooh,
motherfucker, and that one that's the one I'm going to remember for a long time because it was I thought I was kind of putting him back in his place, but Louis always has the ace card.
for sure. The bloat made me laugh because I remember one of the first times I ever met Nate Harvey. It was at an RPS meet in Buffalo, and I see him in the bathroom just running his hands under cold water after the bench
Yeah,
press because he had taken so much butte, his hands
yeah,
swelled like Mickey Mouse gloves, and he couldn't hold a deadlift bar.
yeah.
I was like, this is
Yeah,
ridiculous.
no, I mean, looking back, that shit was so stupid. It might have helped with the gear back then because the
Yeah.
softer you were, the more you were able to kind of work the gear a little bit. The gear today, no. Lifters today, no. I mean, it's not. I would not advise people doing that. That the biggest rebound I ever had is I made 75 one time. I went from 75 to 302 in a day, and none of my shit fit the next day at all. So it was a disaster meet because my squat sucked because my squat suit was just killing me like you can't believe. The bencher didn't even fit. It didn't
Oh,
fit. We couldn't even get it on. So at that point, I'm like, I'm not going to do this 135 bench shit or
yeah.
bench raw because it was after a pec tear as well, and just scratched the whole meet. But the whole running joke after that was, everybody wanted to know how I did it, and it was, Butte was a big part of that. Um, the my bathtub in the hotel room, I filled it a quarter of the way full, and then dumped in as much electrolyte powder and Gatorade powder as I possibly could. And then every time I would go by, I would just, use like a shaker cup and I killed all of it. So all of that plus the
Oh,
regular meals as well. I couldn't see for shit the next day. It was a beautiful bloat, but oh my God, it was the wrong thing.
your blood pressure must have been legendary.
Yes, I'm sure it was. I never checked back then. I would only imagine. I, there's no doubt in my mind where, heart issues that I've
Yeah.
had in the past actually started to stem and form from.
The story's coming full circle.
Yeah, yeah.
The last question I have for you, and I think you'll appreciate it as a businessman. I'm going to get you to do my job for me.
Hmm.
Who is one person that you would like to see on this podcast with the caveat that you have to help me get them on?
With your demographic and what you're trying to do and what your clients are trying to do, I would probably lean towards Jordan Syatt
I would love to speak to that guy.
because you're working. I mean, he's got the. I mean, he worked for Gary Vee for a long time, so he understands the social media side of this.
Oh
He
yeah.
understands the side of how to scale the program slash paywall, whatever you want to call that on the back end. And his retention rate is ridiculously high. So he understands, providing value and maintaining value.
Mm.
Um, I can probably hook you guys up for that.
Love that. Dave, thank you so very much for your time. I know you're a busy man, but again, you're always open to passing it on and paying it forward. And it's something I really appreciate. Looking forward to connecting again this summer with you.
Yeah.
I'll have links to Elite, to your socials, to your YouTube in the show notes, but is there anything else that you'd like to say before we hop off?
No, just thank you for what you're doing. Like I said, it's really cool to see, you know, the same aim,
Hmm.
as strong, actually stronger than what it was, 25 years ago, where, I'm in this cohort, of old heads, and you hear what most of them say. And most of them, I don't think, are very dialed in with what's actually going on.
Hmm.
When I first started and Elite FTS was pushing content out, it was like us, um, bodybuilding.com, and T Nation.
Hmm.
And that was about it.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about, the number of coaches to be able to, help other people put content out and disseminate information, we're talking certainly under 100 for sure, probably even under 50 that are actually doing that. And now we have this problem, of information overload, which I'm not sure I would call that a problem, because
Either.
even a basic level of education can filter out most of the noise. But even after you filter out all the non-optimal noise, there's still thousands of people that are out there that can provide value. And then out of those thousands, there's probably still thousands of coaches out there who can help other people, with the online mentorship or coaching or training or whatever it's going to be. Are there bad ones? Of course there's bad ones, but there's also really good ones. And if somebody's patient and they can just happen to find a really good one that's just starting out, what an opportunity that is. Because think back when you only had 5 or 10 clients, and the level of service you were trying to give them to be
Hmm.
able to build your business is ridiculous compared to now. It's more dialed in,
For
the
sure.
level of service now. But if you're a young person that, can't really afford a coach or something like that, there's platforms like yourself and many others that can refer people that are just getting started, and their rates aren't going to be the same as what the others are, but they're going to bust their ass, because they want it so bad, to be able to build up through. So
For
it's
sure.
it's it's way better today than it was 25 years ago, no matter what anybody ever says.
Couldn't agree more. Dave, thank you so much for your time. Please, everyone, make sure to like, share, subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, and we'll catch you on the next one.